Great to have you with us. I see some new folks as well. I also see folks introducing yourself over in the chat from all around the United States. I also noted India, the UK, several from Canada. So great to have a global audience with us here today. Please keep that chat box open. That'll be your opportunity to interact with us today and our special guest, ask questions as we go along. If you're new to I4CP, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm that discovers the people practices that drive high performance. We define high performance by 4 fairly standard business metrics: revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And in our research studies, we like to tease out what, say, the top quartile of organizations, those high performers, are truly doing differently in their people practices than their lower performing counterparts. We are a member-based organization. You see here just a partial list of some of the logos of some of our member organizations. You see they range from very large companies like Amazon, Microsoft, 3M, Visa, Accenture, and others. We've got pretty much all industries included in I4CP membership, from retail, manufacturing, high-tech, finance, you name it. We've also got a growing cohort of smaller companies from healthcare and also unicorn startup type companies. If you're with a member organization and on the call with us today, special welcome to you. If you're with a different organization that's not yet a member but would like to learn more, please just reach out to anyone at I4CP and we'd be happy to help you get that information. You can also just visit our website at i4cp.com to learn about what's included in membership. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP and a fairly regular host of these Next Practices weekly calls. This week, I'm joined by my colleague, Judy Albers, our Director of Research Enablement. Good morning, Judy.
Hi, Tom.
Good to have you with us. A few other preliminaries before we introduce our guest for today. We've got a nice lineup of other guests coming up for the rest of May. Today, as you'll soon find out, our topic is going to be largely focused on AI and its use in HR. We'll be covering some of the same topic next week with Rob Wellen from BDO Digital with a slightly different angle and lens on it. And then we'll be pivoting to some learning and development topics with Joe Pollard from TrueBridge, and then a cohort of folks from Children's Minnesota talking about their leadership development programs on the 30th. Also want to note for our global colleagues that we have sessions that are at different dates, different time zone, specific times in particular for our friends in the APAC region and Europe, Middle East, Africa region. So go out to our website. You can find those. If you've got folks on your team that are located in those time zones, would love to have them join these calls. We cover a lot of the same topics. They're not as frequent. They're not every week, but every month we hit up the folks in these regions with topics like culture, DE&I, learning and development, talent acquisition, total rewards, you name it. Couple of other quick things before we dive into our conversation today. If you're new to I4CP, you may not know that one of our big focus areas over the years has been on organizational culture. Did a major study on this about 5 years ago now, that then led to an expanded look at culture in the book that our CEO and co-founder Kevin Oakes wrote called Culture Renovation: 18 Leadership Actions to Build an Unshakable Company. We've really got an expansive set of products and services for both membership and more broadly on culture. So again, if you're new to our organization, you might not realize all of this. You can learn more at culturerenovation.com. And then one thing that I wanted to highlight, we've mentioned it a couple times over the past 6 or 9 months on these calls. We have a relatively new offering called advisory services. Advisory services will grow over time, but certainly initially it's very focused on culture and organizations. You see here some of the things that you can learn by having an insight session with Marshall Bergman, our head of advisory services, culture measurement insight sessions. So if you want to learn more about what these briefings can entail, again, just contact us, go out to our website, and you can reach out and learn more about that. All right, with that announcements out of the way, let's bring on our guest for today, and I'm going to turn things over to Judy to lead the conversation.
Thanks, Tom, and welcome, Brandon. I'm so thrilled to have you here today, not least because we got a little bit of a preview of what you're going to talk about. But as a career learning and development professional, I always made really good friends with the people analytics folks. People analytics were some of my favorite people because we were all trying to make a measurable difference. And so I think it's really fascinating that you've had such a long history in people analytics with actually 3 really impressive companies, Qualcomm, Pinterest, and ServiceNow. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your role at ServiceNow, but also your history, how you got to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So I spent about the first 20 years of my career so far in people analytics. And as you said, at 3 kind of amazing companies, all very different sizes, different scales. And, I've always loved analytics, always loved data, math. That's just been something I've been passionate about since I was a kid. But in 2007, I started at Qualcomm, and companies like Google and the really early adopters of people analytics were just coming out with, hey, we're doing some really incredible things here with data. And I just fell in love. I fell in love with the mission of using data to make people's jobs better, to make people's lives better through making them more productive, creating amazing careers, all of that. And I haven't looked back. I still love it. I'm still passionate about it. I think it's an amazing field to be in. And I found my mission there. In terms of like my career, like I said, I started at Qualcomm in 2007, actually as the iPhone was released, like almost exactly when the iPhone was released. And Qualcomm is the chip maker for the iPhone. So got to experience a really exciting time there. The mobile boom, how mobile really changed technology in the same way or a similar way to what we're seeing in Gen AI today. Then I moved to Pinterest. It was a couple hundred employees and got to experience that company grow and take it public. And so that was a really exciting experience. In both companies, we got to kind of build the people analytics function from the ground up. And then spent the last 5 years of my career at ServiceNow. So built the people analytics function there, got to experience the rocket ship that is ServiceNow. And so it's been a lot of fun, a lot of joy coming out of that. In terms of my role today, like it says, I'm the group vice president of people analytics and AI. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We lead people analytics, dashboards, data science, employee listening, workforce planning. And then for the last probably year or so, almost all of my time is focused on that second part, which is AI and really thinking about our AI strategy at ServiceNow.
We're so fortunate to have you here. And I think to put a person who's made a career out of building functions from the ground up in charge of AI is really smart. And I talk to a lot of companies who are hesitant about getting started. They're maybe waiting, or worse, they see it as just another technology implementation, and they're just like, we're just going to wait for IT to tell us when it's rolling out. But you've taken a very different and very proactive approach to this. So we've got your first slide here. Why don't you walk us through how you got started with AI at ServiceNow?
Yeah, and I had an experience that I think probably everybody on the call can relate to, which, I was not a Gen AI early adopter. I didn't know what it was until the beginning of last year when literally every headline was taken over by ChatGPT 4 and the release of it. And so, I saw the user growth. I saw that it was everywhere. Every company was talking about it. And, I just felt I have to wrap my arms around this. I have to understand this better and understand what it means to my role, to the world of work. And, what I did was, and this is really simple, I think a lot of people have done it at this point, but at the time I just took a week and I said, every question that I ask or that someone asks me, I'm going to put into ChatGPT and see what it comes back with. And, I had this feeling, which was just total dread and being completely overwhelmed by how well it did at answering some of the things that I consider to be, part of my role. And I think a lot of people had I mean, I don't think I'm alone there. I think a lot of people had that reaction of just like, hey, this is really, this is big. This is going to change how we do work. And whenever I have that feeling of just overwhelm, and I knew I couldn't get answers to every question that I wanted answers to, but what we did was say, okay, what are the questions we're trying to answer? If we're going to set an AI strategy, what are the things that we need to understand better as an organization? And so our CHRO, our leadership team spent a lot of time just talking about this topic and saying, okay, what do we need answers to? And we came up with these 4 questions. And, there's nothing revolutionary here. but they really helped us sort of structure the work. And so those questions are, how is AI going to change the work across the organization? For ServiceNow as a company, our sales and engineering groups are the most important pieces of our organization. They're the biggest pieces of our organization. And so we really wanted to understand, how does this change how we approach customers? How does it change how we develop code? Those types of questions to me are really important to setting an AI strategy as an organization, understanding how it's going to change the work of the employees across your company. Similarly, we were the leaders of the HR function, right? So the HR function at ServiceNow is over 1,000 people. And so we had to think about, how is AI going to change the HR function and how we get work done? And then a related, but I consider it to be different question is, how is AI going to change HR tech and analytics and how we use it? And then lastly, HR is a steward of our culture at ServiceNow. ServiceNow uses AI in our product. And so we have AI use cases all over the company. So how do we ensure ethical, moral, and legal use of AI in not just what we're implementing? I think that's really important, not just what HR is implementing, but having a voice at the table for any AI use case that's being implemented across the organization.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so break it into like what we did was just structure the work this way, right? So we assigned an owner to each of these questions. We spent 3 months basically connecting weekly and getting research from companies like i4CP and a number of others to get answers, just get the best understanding of these 4 questions that we could. And that was really key to our approach and ultimately what the strategy that we're going to share today. And then the last thing I'll say, concurrently to this, right? We had these 4 questions. We had these things we wanted to get answers to. We were soaking up as much information as we possibly could. But at the same time, we said, we got to go and we got to identify the best possible use case. It may not be perfect, but we got to identify something that we can start to build and implement from an AI perspective and just go after it. So I think you kind of need these 2-pronged approach of, hey, do your research, understand what you can about the problem, but then also just get in there and start building, because I guarantee you're going to learn so much about what you need to do from an AI strategy perspective by going after a particular use case.
You're absolutely right. If there was ever a moment to act in an agile way, this is it. And I love that you assigned an owner to each of these 4 questions. I often tell people, 2 things. One, this is one of the moments like the pandemic where HR has an opportunity to be so much more strategic than it is today. And this is our opening to walk into. I also tell people, you cannot have an informed point of view on the future of work itself if you don't have an informed point of view on AI. And you only get that by using it. I'm the same way. I have made the shift. I use my AI assistant every day. And yeah, every question that pops into my head, I think of my assistant like a talent. And I'm like, I need to ask Elroy. But Brandon, there's AI for personal productivity, but then there's AI to elevate an entire function. And you've put together a really nice strategy and operating model where I don't think many companies are as far along especially to be able to write it down, have a slide that says, here's how we've organized our AI strategy. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so our strategy is, something about the number 4. We had 4 questions and our AI strategy is called the 4-point plan. But we had 4 pillars that we really thought were important after we did all that research to sort of move us forward. So those research questions are really just, what do we need to answer? And this is really a strategy about what do we need to go do. And so the first one is implement an AI operating model. We wanted to figure out how we created what we call an AI factory, right? To take ideas from across the organization and convert them into reality. And there's a lot on that first pillar, and we're actually going to talk more about that in a minute and specifically show you how it works at ServiceNow. But that's really key. You really need to think about how you take your employees' ideas and convert them into reality. And we've had a lot of success with that. The second piece is build the tech foundation. So, there's a lot of technical questions that need to be answered in order to enable an organization to use AI effectively. Some of those are about which tools you invest in, which platforms you use, but it's also about things like data architecture and figuring out how you bring all the data you need into a single place so that you can leverage the data on an AI use case. If you have a lot of data, what they call data silos, right? Your data is all over the place. your AI strategy is not going to be effective. And we need to start thinking about that now to set us up for success in the future. And I think that's really, really key. The third piece is to invest strategically. This is not someone's day job. This is not a part of their role. This is not, just something you lop onto your tech function. You need to hire talent and you need to invest in a lot of different pieces in order to be successful from an AI perspective. I really believe that. So we've hired a head of AI on my team who really has experience in building AI, building tools, leveraging AI, and can help us think about governance and all the things you need to think about. We've also invested a lot in data sources, external data sources that we can bring in to help us supercharge our models and make us better. And I think most HR organizations aren't quite there yet, but I think you should be looking externally for data sources that you can use in a variety of different use cases.
Data sources like what?
So like a good one is we're bringing in a lot of external market data on the labor market. So job posts, we're getting companies to actually give us that information so that we can better forecast using AI, headcount, what we're going to be hiring, how difficult it's going to be to hire for roles, all of that. That's just an example, but there's a number of those. I think that type of data has historically sort of been disconnected from your internal data. And I think more and more we need to bring that together.
Oh, brilliant. And your fourth pillar.
Yeah.
Enable.
So this is huge. And to me, this is the one that has the biggest opportunity to create failure and success. And I think for us, supporting AI education across the organization, and there's a bunch of different pieces to this. Part of it is reskilling and upskilling. I think that everyone's been talking about how AI is going to create capacity, and we need to think about reskilling and upskilling. So that's part of this pillar. But we also created these like 4, tracks around AI education. So the first is no AI. So no AI is just simply, hey, we want everyone to have a baseline foundational understanding of what AI is and what it can do across every employee in our company. So we did an AI 101 course where 23,000 employees came to it and really learned about what AI is and how we plan to use it internally. Then there's use AI, right? A lot of people's roles are going to be changed and augmented. And AI, you need to know how to use the tools. You can't just launch an AI solution to employees and not enable them on how to use it. That's really, really key we've seen adoption be really bad in use cases where we haven't done that and be much more effective once we have.
People think it's a glorified Google search.
Yeah.
Ask it one question, get one answer. Or, they just, and you do see a huge difference between the sorts of productivity improvements that you see with empirical studies with a control and an experimental group versus self-reported productivity improvements for early adopters of Gen AI tools. And I think that's the big difference is, people fit AI into their old mindset of what technology can do for me.
Yep, exactly. And we really want AI to be in the flow of work for the people who are going to be using these tools. So there's a lot you have to work through in terms of process and where the tool lives from an experience perspective. And working with those employees, training them on the right way to use the tool has been really, really key to this success. And we'll talk about some of the use cases we're pursuing specifically in that space later. And then build AI is like the technical folks, right? We need to train people on how to build actual models and leverage the tools that we have available. And then for us as a company, we also have an AI product. So we have a 4th track that's around selling AI so that our sellers understand how to use it.
And more people are having AI products in their own companies as well. I wanted to mention something too, when you said build AI, because you're the numbers guy and I'm the words gal. I always loved words. And so I went into instructional design and learning and development. And this is the first time in my career that I actually felt like, oh, I have an advantage. I might not be building, say, large language models, but I'm definitely building my own bots.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think it's only going to get easier.
Right.
And so I think that's a really interesting part that we're thinking about a lot now, which is same way there's been this citizen development thing that's been happening in engineering for a long time, right? People developing applications, they're making it easier and easier and I think AI is the same way. And pretty soon you're going to be developing your own use cases and building in a way that's more drag and drop. And I think that's something we have to think about, how we enable folks in that space too.
I agree. And it makes you think about, oh, my skills need to be identifying really clearly what I'm trying to do, giving really good, clear instructions. It's just different than having to learn software and coding.
Yeah.
Let's some fun. What do you have here?
Yeah. So this is a little bit of background on how we're structured that I think will help you understand our AI strategy or our AI operating model, which we're going to talk about in a minute here. So we are actually, you've heard a lot of organizations talk about product mindset, and our CHRO, Jackie Caney, is very passionate about this topic. And we actually organize our HR technology crew into product groups. And they're organized around the employee lifecycle. So we have a product group that's around Find Me, and you can see on the slide the type of technology that they're working on. This has engineers, designers, product managers that all sort of focus on each of these different parts of the employee lifecycle. Mm-hmm. And so this had existed for well before Gen AI came around, and we've been working on this for a long time. And what we wanted to think about is, how do we leverage this model and combine it with AI, and how we want to think about AI so that it's infused into all of our technology and all of our different product groups. So I just wanted to share this as kind of background for how we're structured, and I think it'll make the next slide a little bit more clear.
I really appreciate that, Brandon, because I think that we still have a lot of HR professionals, when you say product mindset, they don't necessarily realize that there's an entire profession called product manager in a technology company, that there are proven practices in user experience design, user journey mapping. And what you just showed us was the employee journey. And so there's a big shift coming for folks who haven't been exposed to that entire field, because anyone who's serving anyone, like HR serving employees, should in fact have a product mindset. Yeah.
And I think there's sort of a few different pieces to that. I think every employee, even if you're not in a technology group, needs to develop product mindset. Like there's like this knowledge and understanding that you have to have about how products are developed. And then more and more, this might be a little bit provocative, but I really believe this. I think more and more the skill sets that are in HR are going to be closer and closer to what is in IT today. And we're going to need more and more technology folks, more and more product folks who can build technology to deliver what we want as an organization. And so this is sort of our step along that journey. And I think it's an important one for organizations to consider.
I agree with you. And it forces us to have deep empathy, because we're thinking about the user's experience, the employee experience.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a key part of it for sure. So this is where it's going to build. So if you're wondering why there's a blank slide, it's coming. But what we were experiencing was ideas all over the organization for AI, right? And I talked about our AI strategy, that first pillar, the implementing the AI operating model. This is sort of how we did it. And we had pockets of things popping up in different places, and there really wasn't this sort of structured approach, and we wanted to address that. And so what we said was, we want all your ideas. We want to understand everything that you could think about AI in your role, whether you're in DEI, you're an HR business partner, you're in recruiting, whatever it is. And we want to hear from you. And we actually built what we call the Idea app, which is built on the ServiceNow platform. It's a workflow. We're a workflow company, so it's a technology solution that helps us do that. But someone submits an idea, they describe what they think the value of the proposition is and what the problem we're trying to solve is. Sorry, TACO is a specific organization focused on partner training. So it's basically an L&D, part of our L&D. I should have removed that one. Sorry, I'm using it.
No, that's all right. Several people in the chat asked what TACO stands for, and also GET, if you could explain GET.
Yeah, Global Enablement Training. So we have sales enablement and our partner enablement as different learning and development functions within our organization. And they have different customers, but they're basically an L&D organization. They're just not internally focused. So it's pretty much L&D. But the important part about this is we're getting ideas from across all the different functions in our organization. It goes into this idea app where they describe the problem and the solution they're trying to get to and the value of it. And at that point, it goes to those product groups that you saw on the last slide. So if it's around a find me use case, if it's around whatever, all those different product groups that you see there. And they do their own due diligence to understand, how does this fit into our roadmap? Maybe we've already thought about it and it's part of our future technology roadmap. Maybe it's something completely new that we should drop everything for and start to pursue. Or maybe it's something we should just kind of keep on the back burner, or maybe it's something we shouldn't do at all. And so we basically track these ideas, disposition them so they get moved to a roadmap, or they get, say, hey, we're not going to pursue this, whatever it is. And then the process, the structured process starts about how we convert these ideas into reality. And the product group starts, they do this AI use case prep. And then the next step is it goes through an HR and legal review. So this is part of our governance structure. We'll talk about that a little bit more. That blue box you see there is our HR and legal review. This brings together privacy, our legal team, compliance, data governance, and they basically get a chance to express concerns, again, tying that moral, ethical part of this into our process so that we have that checkpoint. And then if it gets past that, right, we have the prep done, we've gone through the HR and legal review, it goes to our AI and HR steerco, which does assessment and prioritization. And then it goes back to the product groups for execution and delivery of that within their roadmap. And we're doing this kind of monthly, depending on the volume, but we're meeting with these groups about monthly and trying to consistently stay on top. We've had over 120 ideas submitted to these product groups from across the organization, and we can continue to use this model.
I love this operating model for a couple reasons. The two boxes sort of on the right, besides the execution box, one, having an explicit sort of steering committee assessment and prioritization is great, because that will avoid, hopefully, or at least minimize the chaos of all sorts of ideas being implemented by all sorts of teams without any umbrella oversight. But then that critical HR and legal review, I'm assuming everyone involved in AI in any way has had at least minimal training on the ethical aspects and the key concepts that legal and data governance and privacy and all of that, at least minimally. But to rely on that sort of, oh yeah, I took the compliance course on that. Yeah. If you're on an execution team, that you could easily forget some of those key things. You could easily want to, be the all-star and create the awesome execution product, and sort of maybe not cut corners necessarily, but just sort of gloss over some of that. So having that explicit HR and legal review for the ethics, for the governance, for the privacy, it doesn't take the responsibility off everyone else, but it makes sure that it happens.
I could not agree more. And if you think you have an understanding of data privacy and the legal regulation around this topic, you don't. I don't. I spend my whole life on this topic, and it is incredibly complex, especially if you're a global organization. So we're going to talk about sort of the moral ethical piece a little bit later. But to me, that partnership component of all those teams I mentioned, legal, privacy, compliance, is crucial. And you can't just, do your best guess. It's so complex.
It's huge. This is probably the simplest, clearest operating model for AI I have seen. Plus, it has Get Taco in it. So it's not. I think your global people strategy is also really simple and clear and easy to understand. Just giving you a segue to the next slide.
Yeah. So, and I think, we're talking about how do you organize an AI strategy, and the reason I included this slide is because one of the things that I think is really important is that AI and the implementation of AI needs to be a change of the entire people organization, right? A change of the entire operating model, from my perspective. And to do that, you really need leadership buy-in, and it needs to be a part of your strategy. So our CHRO is very passionate about the topic. I consider myself very lucky to have a leader who's really bought into this. But this is actually, when she goes to our leadership and our organization, this is the slide she shows for her strategy, right? Very simple, but it has a lot in there. So people-led, that's really that product mindset component, all of those pieces that we just talked about. that product model. But then you see that AI powered and data driven are actually the pillars of her strategy. This is what we believe we need to do as an HR organization to be successful for the future. It's not, underlying other pieces. It's not it is the piece. It's the core pillar. And I think that's really important at that leadership level.
I am old enough to remember when email arrived and how many executives skated through to retirement, never having to use email. They would have someone print, kids today don't even know that an inbox was a physical box, and pieces of paper would come into your inbox and they would go out of your outbox. And I fear that there are a lot of heads of HR right now who don't realize that AI is this critical. It's one of the 3 pillars. And
I think that's important. Yeah. And I think, with any new technology, there's like these ups and downs. People can feel a little jaded, like there's a hype cycle. I think there may be some hype cycle, right? There may be overhyped in certain areas, but I think the core of the message that AI is going to change how we work is basically a fact. It's going to change how we work no matter what. Exactly how that works out and what technologies do what is still to be decided. But I think you can be a little bit jaded, and I think that's a bad move. I think we need to keep focusing on it and keep working towards it because it's coming.
It's not just another technology. It's not like, oh, last year it was VR and augmented reality. This year, no, this is like people thought electricity was hype too.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. Mobile too. There was the same sort of who wants to have everything on their phone? The screen's too small, whatever the complaint was, right? But it's natural, but we need to keep moving forward on the topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry. You can jump in or if you want. Okay. So like the part of what I wanted to answer too is like, how is AI going to impact work? If you noticed on those 4 questions we asked at the beginning, right? 2 of them related to how AI is going to impact the work that we do as an organization. And there's lots of slides out there that cover the same topic, but I really like this one. And I think a lot about these pillars and how our different use cases map to these different ways that AI can impact work. So the first is automate. AI, machine learning, the history of AI has been around automation. This is nothing new, right? But what Gen AI does is opens up a bunch of different use cases that can help automate things that we've historically done. What it does even more than automate is augment. And, I think all the things we're talking about with ChatGPT, basically, taking some tasks that you are doing, getting you a first draft, that's an example of augmentation. Basically taking a task, doing part of it for you, making you faster, making you better. And I think that's the pillar that we as an HR organization should be the most focused on, because I think that's going to impact almost every role in the organization. The other part is AI can extend what you do as an organization. Even if a human is better at doing something, AI can do, if you can build it as an AI, it can do something 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, ongoing, over and over and over again. So I think this one is the one that I feel like people miss the most. I think it's actually really important that if you have something that's really scaled, even if a human's better at doing it, that you get this benefit of using AI by extending your capacity. And then what Gen AI really did was create that 4th pillar. And there were other AI that had tried to do it in the past, but Gen AI really supercharged this create. It's creating content, it's creating visuals, it's creating all sorts of things. And I think that is what's really new about Gen AI versus other AI and machine learning and everything that's been around for a lot longer. And I think we should be thinking about each of these pillars and how we can leverage it in different roles across our organization.
I think that's really, really smart. So many people think about AI only in terms of automation, but not in terms of the rest.
Yeah.
Did you see that Moderna announced last week that their employees have created over 300 bots, Gen AI bots that augment and extend their own work?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's not going to slow down like that. And I also, like we were talking about earlier, I really think that's going to get easier and easier. It's already pretty easy to do. If you have a data source with enough information, you can attach things pretty quickly and get it moving. So I totally agree. And I think what's going to be what's this really interesting strategic question is, if you have all these bots structured all over the place, what does that mean for consistency and development of technology internally? And how do you sort of keep control of that? That's a whole nother challenge. And then like the other thing I wanted to say about how AI impacts work, one of the things that we did that I think, every organization should do this in some form, but we took our roles that were the most important. I talked about sales and engineering, and we did a task analysis. So basically breaking down a role into tasks that they do consistently day to day. And we basically map those tasks to these 4 pillars and say, how much of this task is going to be automated, augmented? Could we extend it? And is there any form of creation that we need? And what we could do there is start to, use data and get to a real quantitative answer about how much capacity do we believe is going to be created by AI in specific roles over some time period. I think we were using kind of 5 years. And what we found was, for the roles that we looked at, right, it's not like there was no role where everything AI is going to completely take away everybody's work. Like, there is not a single role in the organization where we found that. But we did see that on average, about 20% additional capacity created by AI we expect in about 5 years. And that's not massive, but it's also not small, right? That's a number that we have to think about. And we use that to really inform our reskilling and upskilling strategy, and saying, hey, where are those roles where we really think capacity gains are going to be the largest? And how do we develop a strategy around that? And then the other part of it, which I feel like people aren't talking enough about this, is we still have a little bit of time. We still have a few years to react to this sort of technology and implementing it. I think we can work, if you do this now and understand where those capacity gains, you should be able to workforce plan in a way that plans for your headcount that you need, and those that maybe you keep flat, even though because of the increased capacity through AI. And I think that's a really important part of making sure you don't end up 5 years from now having too much of a certain skill and too little of another.
I know that we're everyone's eager to hear what's going to come next, which is some specific use cases that you've developed at ServiceNow in some of these 4 areas that you've got on the screen. But I just wanted to highlight what we just said about task analysis. We at I4CP have been recommending that to our member companies for several years, following the sort of seminal work of John Boudreau, who's an emeritus professor and well-known HR book author and thought leader from USC. He often talked about job deconstruction down to the sort of task and skill level, and relooking at job descriptions and figuring out where things could be moved around the organization. We believe in that so much that we've long had a 7-step workforce planning, which you just mentioned, a workforce planning process at I4CP. And several years ago, even before Gen AI came out, when we did our first study on automation and AI, we updated that process to fuse in, particularly for the task analysis, the job deconstruction phase, a consideration of automation and AI. Where will these come into play for each job as you deconstruct it down to that task and skill level? So yeah, we've been sort of on top of that trend, and it's great to hear that you all are thinking the same way and doing that at ServiceNow.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it's a very actionable next step that organizations can take.
I think we're done with the slides, and because we're now going to talk about some specific use cases that ServiceNow is pursuing, we promise that there will be extremely good notes after this, folks. But Brandon, I'm really excited to hear about what you have, what usage of AI you are pursuing now, and what your results are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll talk about sort of 2 groups, because I know everyone's very excited about Gen AI and those specific use cases. So I've got like 3 examples in the Gen AI space. We have a number of those. I still believe there's a lot you can do with AI, machine learning, that people aren't doing today, and sort of oversight by the big boom of Gen AI. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But on the Gen AI side, there's 3 that I wanted to talk about. So one is the one that I think I've heard the most externally. Actually, Diane Garrison, who was on this podcast a few weeks back, mentioned this concept of sentiment summarization, which is bringing employee sentiment from all your surveys from external sources where employees provide sentiment, from everywhere where they provide that information into a single place, and then creating an interface where you can really question and answer employees' questions. So if you're an HR employee thinking about leadership development, you can go there and just say, hey, what are employees saying about our leadership development program? Or what are they saying about our most recent compensation change, and being able to get summarized answers to that. I think a lot of people are pursuing that use case, and I think it's a good one because it's relatively low risk and saves a lot of time.
I think a lot of people are pursuing it. I think a lot of people are not aware of what you just said, that anyone can ask a question of data. Wow.
Yeah, creating an interface is like, I think that experience component of AI is really interesting. Like, a lot of people are building models, right? But how do you integrate it into the flow of work so that people, like you said, the reason people are building these bots is because it's right on their computer and they can use it while they're working. It's just easy. If they have to go somewhere or remember where it lives or anything like that, it just is unlikely to be successful. So I do think that experience component is key. We use our own technology. So ServiceNow helps company like automate, do digital transformation. That's what our company does. And we have a product called Now Assist for HR service delivery. It's really for shared services functions, but we've seen some amazing results from this. So basically, if you think about an HR shared service agent, they get requests constantly of people saying, hey, I have these questions about benefits. I have this question about an ER case, whatever it is, right? And they go back and forth with these employees in whatever system you use to sort of track that work. And what we found was employees then go on vacation, or they leave, or they, whatever happens, right? And then at that point, it has to transfer to a new agent. And it was taking a significant amount of time for that new agent to get up to speed on the case. And so we get thousands and thousands of these tickets, much like most large organizations. There's a huge scale to this. And by implementing Gen AI to basically summarize the history of a case, any communication via email or chat, you get this summarization of what happened in the case. And we're finding that agents can get up to speed about 37% faster. And when you multiply that by thousands and thousands of cases, you get a pretty significant productivity increase. And so that's sort of one piece of Now Assist. The other part that I really like, so ServiceNow as a platform, we have something called a knowledge base. A knowledge base is just basically every policy you have in your organization, right? So you have a policy on 401k, on your benefits, on your IT hardware. We have those all in a single platform, and we put Gen AI search on top of it. And instead of having to go and dig through a 20-page policy document, you get this summarized answer of exactly what you need. It knows your country, right? It knows your level. It knows all this stuff about you. And then Gen AI uses that information in combination with the policy documents and gives you the answer you need. And that one has been the overwhelming fan favorite because people it's saving a ton of time, and no one wants to read a 20-page policy doc. I can guarantee you that.
Nobody wants to read a 20-page anything.
Fair enough.
But it brings up a really good question, and you talked about this earlier, but Angela said in the chat that the news likes to grab onto stories. AI hallucinates, and if you're attaching your AI to the wrong data, or if you haven't trained your AI well, you can absolutely have a scenario in which it's giving employees inaccurate information. So yeah, tell us about how you are trying to get ahead of that.
Yeah, great question. I love this question, and it's something we're spending a lot of time thinking about now. But the simple answer is that you need a content governance structure. I think if you think about what HR organizations have done historically with data, so think about data that feeds into your compensation process. Typically, there's a ton of governance around how that data, who goes into what job role, what goes into, what are those fields that ultimately impact your compensation, and you create a process around it to review, to understand, to create checks and balance and audits. We need to be doing the same thing with anything that's going into a Gen AI model, period. You cannot just turn it loose on a database that you haven't looked at in 20 years. Like, you need to be able to say that we feel confident in the answers that are in there. And so we have a content governance process that's run by our people operations function. They do an amazing job of making sure that these articles that are on our knowledge base are accurate, are up to date, provide the right level of specificity, right? Some countries are different, regions are different, levels are different. And I think, people talk about all the jobs that AI is taking. This is a place where I see a lot of growth. This content governance, figuring out how you really get accurate information, feeding into the model is there's going to be more of those in HR in the future.
We're doing, I mean, it's a much smaller scale, but we're currently beta testing our own AI tool that looks at our own research corpus. But to be able to determine what content, what are things that we might have posted, years ago where something has changed. And so there's a different form of content governance that is required when AI is looking at your content than when a search engine is looking at your content.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there was a question about accuracy. And yes, you have to measure accuracy. I think one of the tricky parts with Gen AI that I haven't figured out, I'd love to hear if anybody on the call has, but what is accuracy in Gen AI? Is it that the employee feels that they got the answer that they needed? Is it that they just don't get any wrong information? But what if it doesn't actually answer their question? There's a lot of components to accuracy that I think we need to think through right now. And I'm not really happy with this because I think there are risks associated with it. We're basically doing audits to check if there's any wrong information based on their answers that are responded. And then we also ask employees in the moment, did this answer your question? And we use those two to measure accuracy. I think there's more we need to do in that space to decide what accuracy really is.
And to compare it to how they attempt to get answers now and how,
right. You get wrong information all the time via people too. So it's figuring out how you get to that same level of accuracy.
Let's talk about your CHRO dashboard, shall we?
Yeah. So that's a use case. So our CHRO dashboard is actually publicly available. If you search ServiceNow CHRO dashboard, you can see exactly what it is. But the basic concept is a single pane of glass for our CHRO that gets the information about everything: attrition, performance, DEI, everything that our CHRO cares about, single place. And it's amazing. It's awesome. But as much as most people have the experience with dashboards, especially at the executive level, it's also completely overwhelming to understand all those different metrics, understand what to take away, what not. And so I really believe that dashboards are a thing of the past, that basically anytime you have a product that is as universally disliked as dashboard, there's going to be disruption coming. And I really believe that's what's coming in that space. And there's a lot of companies that are already starting on solving this problem. But more or less what we do is take the dashboard in the background and create a narrative summary of what we think the key insights are. So Gen AI produces, hey, your attrition rate's gone up for 3 quarters in a row. It's very fact-based. It's not perfect yet, to become totally transparent, but we're really going on this path of how do we get to, I don't need to know 100 metrics. I need to know which metrics I need to focus on. And how do I get to like a summary that I can just go and action on quickly? And I think Gen AI really has the capability of getting there. And there's some things we need to do differently. And this goes back to like setting up your tech infrastructure right to enable that. And I think that's a use case that I'm really passionate about. And we've started to, like I said, on our CHRO dashboard, we've launched this, but we need to make it better. And I think that's a place where there's a lot of vendors involved as well.
I think about the moments when a CHRO is in front of a board and the board asks the simple question, where do we stand with this? Do we have a risk on that? And just to be able to ask the question of the moment and get the answer. Those are the kinds of conversations. I think when technology first arrived, a lot of us sort of thought it was going to magically answer the questions that we had in our head. And instead, we had to learn how software works and learn how search engines work, get huge dashboards and try to interpret them. And we're now seeing AI be able to just get closer to, I have a question in my head, I can get the answer to that question.
Exactly.
Make it accurate and reliable.
And everyone's seen the user growth of ChatGPT, and what is it doing? You're asking a question, you're getting exactly the information that you need, and that's what people want. There's a reason why it's growing like that. It's because that's the experience they want with data and with text and with everything. So we got to figure out how to deliver that. And then, like, the last use cases I'll talk about, and again, I think these have sort of fallen behind the headlines, but there's a lot in AI and machine learning that we're doing as well. So forward-looking headcount predictions, right? If we have, by the middle of the quarter, we can fairly accurately predict how many sales reps we're going to have at the end of the quarter, right? And if we have that month and a half lead time, we can move recruiting capacity over to really make sure we get the right sales reps into the door to support our business plan. And that's for our business, right? And a lot of people, having the right headcount, having the right resources is really critical to delivering on our business. So that's been a key one for us. And we don't just do it with sales reps, we do it with the whole organization, but that's just an example. We do all the other things that a lot of other companies are doing. Flight risk, right? Can you predict who's going to attrit? What's your future attrition rate? And we also use process mining a decent amount. So using AI to really run over your processes and identify where there are bottlenecks or problems that you can help address or fix.
That is a fascinating thing for HR. How many HR professionals can say they do process mining?
Yeah, I think yeah, and then part of it is ServiceNow has like a process mining. So I'm lucky I get to work at a technology company that's kind of leading the edge here. But if you think about it, we have so many processes, and we usually don't even have visibility to how long they're taking and what steps they're having to go through. Like, so I always ask, do you know how many times like somebody submits a ticket is reassigned? Because I'll tell you, the easiest way to piss somebody off is to reassign to 6 different people. And so we really monitor that. We want to be able to say, hey, this is not working. Something's not working. It's not clear to the employee. It's not clear to the agent, whatever the problem is, but figure out how you can make your processes better using data and AI.
Well, Brandon, we've got several, there's so many things we could continue to talk about. I do want to pause. I've been semi-monitoring the chat, Tom, and I see a lot of great comments in there. Are there any questions that we haven't answered yet from the field?
I think there was some interest in something I think we were going to hit maybe in these last couple minutes. We hit on it some around the hallucinations issue and everything, but other sort of downsides or unintended consequences. Can you speak to governance structure, what you're doing around bias, those kinds of aspects?
Yeah. So I think we have this sort of I'll give you kind of 4 points in this topic. There's lots we can talk about here. I talked about one already, which is the partnerships. Make sure you have involvement from legal, data governance, those folks so that they can review it in the same way that you can. You need experts in that space. Second thing is you do need a governance structure. And I really believe pretty passionately the best way to set that up is an enterprise-wide governance that looks over all the use cases, thinks about things like data privacy, data security, technical architecture of all your tools, right, across functions. And then you need a governance structure that's within your HR function. So this is so much like you saw on that operating model, right? That legal checkpoint plus that assessment and prioritization stage that AI steerco are really our functional governance. And we use that time to both talk about use cases, but also to assess how the use cases we've implemented are going, and if we have any issues around accuracy or any of those other things that you just mentioned. And then lastly, I wanted to hit on this last piece of a slide, these concepts that you had brought with you today, because this I think is an interesting 2x2 matrix. Can you just go through this real quick? Yeah, so when use cases come into that assessment and prioritization stage of our operating model, we bring this up, and it's pretty simple, right? I think there's lots of people who are using kind of a similar matrix, but effort by value. Right? Effort is things like the existence and quality of data, how centralized the data is, what the tech infrastructure looks like, security, also ease of implementation and change management. Sometimes there's a great use case, but we have to train 23,000 people in order to be able to implement it, right? That's going to take a lot of effort. Is it worth the value? So we look at effort, and then value is really aligned to our business strategy, right? Does it impact key business outcomes that we care about? Demonstrable ROI, this is a big one, right? And I think a lot of people in the chat have sort of mentioned this concept, but how are you going to show the value of this? And how do you, maybe it's a one-time study where you really go deep and you try to say, okay, how much time is this saving? Or maybe it's more looking at metrics like experience and, speed of getting an answer or whatever. There's lots of different metrics you can look at, but having an OKR that's specifically tied to the use case is really, really key. And then we also use those checkpoints on the right there. So ethical, beyond bias, and privacy and consent. And that beyond bias piece, this is something I'm really passionate about. I think AI has this weird opportunity to really create bias, but it also has this opportunity to reduce bias by monitoring. And if you set up your use cases right to measure that, you really have an opportunity to potentially reduce bias by measurement and through identification, which we haven't had in the past.
We could do a deep dive on that itself, just with our diversity board of chief diversity officers. Everybody's talking about AI.
Yeah. And there's companies out there like vendors that are starting to create algorithms specifically designed to solve for this. And I think this is an area where you can develop internally, but I also think there's a lot of really great tools out there that you can look at that can help you measure this.
Really good point. Well, I don't know about everybody else, but your slides, Brandon, the thought that you have put into making all of these models and approaches, making your operations so clear. I'm literally gonna steal your slides for a meeting later today. And I have a feeling that a lot of people will perceive that you just saved them months worth of work by explaining what you've already done. And so I can't thank you enough for the gift to the HR community that you've given by narrating your work and talking about the journey that you've been on. And I feel really grateful that people like you are leading people analytics functions, and you're making us all better.
Thank you. Please reach out on LinkedIn. I'm happy to, I love talking about this, so happy to.
Well, very good. I want to second that. First, thank you, Judy, for facilitating the conversation with Brandon today. Great work. And once again, Brandon, thank you, as Judy said, shared a lot of great content and a lot of great models. If you have a certification with either HRCI or SHRM, all of these calls in this series are available for a recertification credit hour. So just jot down the relevant program ID or activity ID that was put in the chat or that you see on screen here. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Zeta. Another great event today. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again next week.